There's a quiet worry that follows a lot of people through their working years. It doesn't always announce itself loudly, but it's there, in the back of your mind when you check your account balance, or when you hear someone talking about how much they've already saved. It's the feeling that you're somehow not where you're supposed to be, that you've fallen behind, and maybe the gap is just too large to close now. If that feeling is familiar, I want you to stay with me today because what I'm about to walk you through might genuinely shift how you see your entire financial life. When you actually look at the data, real income data, real spending patterns, how compounding behaves over a full working lifetime, the picture that emerges is not the one most people carry in their heads. It's not a story of people who saved perfectly and arrived at retirement with everything lined up. It's a story of real households, real interruptions, real decades where saving simply wasn't possible. And still, somehow, meaningful wealth was built. That's what we're going to explore today. I'm Clara Morgan, and this is what retirement planning actually looks like when you remove the idealized version and replace it with something true. Let's start with the foundation. When you look at median household income across an entire career, from the mid-20s all the way through the early 60s, a very clear pattern emerges. Income doesn't move in a straight line upward. It follows something much closer to a curve. It starts modest in the early years, climbs steadily through the 30s and 40s, reaches its highest point somewhere in the mid-career years, and then gradually steps down as people begin transitioning out of full-time work. What's striking is that household spending follows nearly the same arc. And when you sit with that for a moment, it makes complete sense. Life expands in the middle years. Homes, children, healthcare, supporting aging parents. And then it gradually contracts as those responsibilities evolve or resolve. You don't spend the same in your 50s as you did in your 40s, and you don't spend in your 60s what you spend in your 50s. Here are the actual median numbers worth anchoring to, and these are household figures, not individual earners. A household could mean one income or two. We're looking at the unit, not the individuals. For households between the ages of 25 and 34, median gross income sits around $88,000, with median spending close to $62,000. Move into the 35 to 44 range, and household income crosses into six figures, while spending rises to approximately $80,000. The peak earning years, 45 to 54, bring median household income to roughly $117,000, and spending peaks alongside it at about $85,000. As households move into the 55 to 64 window, income begins to ease down to around $95,000, and spending follows to about $75,000. Beyond that, both continue to decline in tandem. What this tells us is something important. Income and spending are not separate competing forces in most households. They move together. When people earn more, they tend to live more expansively. When income decreases, spending adjusts accordingly. This is human nature, and the data reflects it clearly. But here's where we have to be precise, because these numbers contain a significant blind spot. Every income figure in that data is gross income, meaning before taxes, and every spending figure excludes savings or investment contributions entirely. So we cannot look at the gap between income and spending and assume that's what's available to invest. We have to think more carefully than that. Once you apply realistic effective tax rates, layering in federal income taxes, payroll taxes, and average state and local taxes, the picture changes meaningfully. At the federal level alone, households earning between $75,000 and $100,000 typically see effective rates somewhere in the 9 to 11% range. Add payroll taxes and state obligations, and many households in these brackets land in a blended effective rate of roughly 15 to 22%. That's not a worst-case assumption. For many American households, it's simply reality. When you run those tax estimates against the income and spending figures, the actual margin left over, what a household could theoretically invest, is modest. For the 25 to 34 age group, there might be roughly $10,000 per year available. In the 35 to 44 range, after-tax income and spending are so close together that for many households, the margin effectively disappears. There may be nothing available to save at all. From 45 to 54, some breathing room returns, perhaps $6,000 annually. And from 55 to 64, that narrows again to something closer to $1,000 per year. This isn't meant to be discouraging, it's meant to be honest. Because when you see these numbers clearly, two things become obvious. First, there is no hidden surplus most households are sitting on. The margin is real, but it's not generous. Second, and this is the part that often gets overlooked, the stretch in the middle, particularly those years from 35 to 44, is not a failure. It's just life. A mortgage that arrived at the top of the budget, a child who required one parent to step back from work, childcare costs that consumed what savings could have been. These aren't excuses. They're the actual texture of American family life. Now, let me walk you through what this actually looks like when you model it from beginning to end. Imagine a household that starts investing at age 25, not from the first day of their career, because school, transition, and early life delays made that impossible. They begin earnestly in their mid-20s. Then, between the ages of 35 and 44, they stop entirely, not because they gave up, but because life got genuinely expensive and there simply wasn't room. Maybe it was a second child. Maybe a parent needed care. Maybe a home purchase left the budget stretched thin for years. Whatever the reason, a full decade passes where nothing goes into retirement accounts. Then, in their mid-40s, they find some stability, and savings resume. They continue, more modestly, through their early 60s, and they retire at 65. Under the assumption that they invest every dollar of their available margin, $10,000 annually from 25 to 34, nothing from 35 to 44, $6,000 annually from 45 to 54, and $1,000 annually from 55 to 64, they contribute a total of $170,000 across their working life. With an 8% average annual return and no withdrawals, that portfolio reaches approximately $1.8 million by retirement. Let that sit for a moment. A total lifetime contribution of $170,000 with a 10-year gap in the middle, growing to $1.8 million. More than 90% of that balance was never deposited. It was generated by time and compounding. The early years did most of the heavy lifting. Those first 10 years of consistent investing before the pause built a foundation that continued growing quietly throughout the entire decade where contributions stopped. That's not a theory, that's arithmetic. And it's the kind of arithmetic most retirement conversations never fully honor. This is also where I want to share something more personal, because numbers without context can feel abstract. I think about the households I've spoken with over the years, and so many of them share a version of the same story. Life interrupted their plan. A divorce, a layoff, a health crisis that rearranged everything. One woman I think of often had to completely restart her financial life in her early 40s. Her marriage had ended, she was raising two children largely on her own, and everything she might have built in her 30s had to begin again from a much smaller place. She felt, for a long time, like the window had closed. It hadn't, because the years she'd invested in her late 20s, even though the amounts were modest, had been compounding the entire time. She didn't start from zero in her 40s. She started from further along than she realized. That kind of story doesn't make it into most financial planning conversations, but it should, because it reflects what actually happens in American households. Now, the scenario I described, investing 100% of the available margin, is a useful baseline, but it isn't realistic for most households. Real life demands more than retirement contributions. There are emergency funds to build, weddings to contribute to, cars that need replacing, and the simple reality that not every spare dollar belongs in a brokerage account. So let's run 3 versions of this household story side by side and see where each one ends. In the first version, the household directs 80% of their available margin into investments and holds the other 20% back for short term needs and flexibility. That means $8,000 per year from ages 25 to 34, nothing from 35 to 44, $6,000 per year from 45 to 54, and $800 per year from 55 to 64. Total contributions $136,000. By retirement at 65, at the same 8% return assumption, that portfolio reaches approximately $1.33 million. In the second version, the household splits their margin evenly, 50% towards retirement, 50% towards other financial priorities. This reflects a household that's balancing multiple goals simultaneously, saving for retirement while also building up short-term reserves, funding a child's education, or simply maintaining a financial cushion that allows them to sleep at night. Here, contributions are $5,000 annually in the early years, zero through the middle decade, $3,000 per year from 45 to 54, and $500 per year from 55 to 64. Total contributions, $85,000. And that portfolio by age 65 is worth approximately $830,000. Three scenarios, three very different savings rates, and yet all three produce what most people would call a meaningful retirement portfolio. That's the point. And it becomes even clearer when we add in one more variable that often gets underweighted in these conversations. For this individual, based on their lifetime earnings, applying a simplified AIM calculation and the 2026 Social Security bend points, here's what monthly benefits might look like. Claiming early at 62 yields approximately $2,300 per month, or around $28,000 annually. Waiting for full retirement age at 67 brings that to roughly $3,300 per month, or about $40,000 per year. And delaying to age 70 produces an estimated $4,100 per month, or just under $50,000 annually. These are illustrations, not a projection from the Social Security Administration, but they give us a useful, grounded range. Now let's combine the portfolio with Social Security and see what retirement income actually looks like. For the household with the $1.33 million portfolio who claims Social Security at 65, a middle ground claiming age, a 4.7% annual withdrawal generates approximately $62,500 from the portfolio. Social Security contributes about $34,000. Total annual retirement income, roughly $97,000. And because this portfolio was built with after-tax dollars in a Roth account, those withdrawals carry no additional federal income tax. For the household that saved more aggressively and arrived at $1.8 million, the same 4.7% withdrawal rate produces portfolio income of approximately $84,600. Add Social Security, and total annual income approaches $119,000. For the household that saved more conservatively and built a portfolio of $830,000, portfolio withdrawals at 4.7% generate about $39,000. Combined with Social Security, annual retirement income lands around $73,600. $73,000 a year. In retirement, built by a median earning household that saved imperfectly, paused for an entire decade, and never earned an exceptional income. That outcome, which is the most conservative of the three, is still a genuinely secure retirement for most Americans. There are several deeply held beliefs about retirement planning that these numbers quietly dismantle. I want to address each one directly because I think they cause a lot of unnecessary anxiety. The first misconception is that you need to save perfectly to retire well. None of the scenarios we modeled were perfect. Every single one included a decade of zero contributions. Every one assumed modest, realistic investment amounts. And every one still produced a portfolio capable of supporting a dignified retirement. Perfection was never required. The second misconception is that a long savings gap is essentially irreversible, that if you had to stop contributing for several years or even a decade, your retirement is fundamentally compromised. That's simply not what the math shows. The reason gaps are survivable is precisely because of what happens while you're not contributing. The money you already invested doesn't pause. It keeps compounding. A 10-year gap feels catastrophic in the abstract, but the portfolio that was built before that gap was still working the entire time. The third misconception is one that catches a lot of people in their 50s and 60s, the belief that they must keep saving as aggressively as possible right up until retirement. But there's a point in many people's financial lives, and it often arrives earlier than expected, when the portfolio itself is generating more wealth than new contributions can. At that stage, the portfolio is doing more work per year than you are. If you need to reduce your contribution rate in your late 50s to handle other financial realities, that doesn't undo the decades of compounding that preceded it. And perhaps the most important reframe of all, the value of early investing is not about amount, it's about time. The dollars you put away at 27 are fundamentally different from the dollars you put away at 47, not because of their face value, but because of how many years of compounding they carry with them. Early investment dollars are disproportionately powerful, and that's not an argument against starting later. It's simply a reminder of why starting, at whatever point you are right now, matters more than waiting for conditions to feel ideal. If you've been listening to all of this and wondering how to translate it into something actionable for your own situation, here's how I'd approach it based on where you are in life right now. If you're in your mid-20s or early 30s, the single most important thing you can do is begin, even modestly. You don't need a large contribution. You don't need a perfect allocation. What you need is an account that's open, funded, and invested in a low-cost, diversified index fund. Even $200 a month at this stage, given enough years, becomes something remarkable. Perfection can come later. Starting has to come now. If you're in your 30s or 40s and feel like the window is narrowing, I want to gently challenge that assumption. If you paused your contributions for several years, or even in the middle of that pause right now, you are not disqualified. Recalibrate what you can contribute given your current circumstances, not what you wish you could contribute, and put that to work consistently. Consistency over time is more powerful than amount in a single year. If you're in your 50s or early 60s, the most valuable thing you can do is get an accurate picture of where you actually stand. Pull your Social Security estimate from SSA.gov, take a clear accounting of every retirement account you hold, run a simple projection using your current balance, your expected return, and your anticipated retirement age. Many people in this age range discover their portfolio is growing faster than they realized, and that gives them genuine options they didn't know they had. And for everyone, regardless of age, build a plan that can flex. A rigid saving strategy that breaks under the pressure of real life is far less valuable than a more modest one you can actually maintain. Life will always have seasons that interrupt the plan. Build the flexibility in ahead of time. What I hope you're taking away from today is not a set of numbers to memorize, but a different way of seeing your own financial story. The median American household does not save perfectly. They don't earn extraordinary incomes. They experience interruptions, setbacks, and years where retirement simply wasn't the priority. And within all of that, within the very real, imperfect, full life most of us actually live, there is still a path to retirement security. Not because someone did everything right, but because they did enough, and because they gave time the room to do what time does. You don't have to have arrived at this point in your life with a perfect record behind you. What matters is what you do with the years ahead. If this perspective resonated with you today, I'd invite you to take one quiet step before the week is out. Not a dramatic financial overhaul, just one thing. Maybe it's finally opening that Roth IRA you've been putting off. Maybe it's checking your Social Security projected benefit for the first time. Maybe it's simply sitting down and writing out what you actually have saved so you can see your real starting point instead of an imagined one. Small, honest steps taken consistently have a way of adding up to something none of us fully expected. And that, in the end, is what retirement planning actually looks like when it's lived well. I'll see you in the next one.